Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with you again, with a guide to flying the Bf109 F-1 and F-2 in arcade. The Friedrichs were a rework of the 109's design, introducing more powerful engines, along with many aerodynamic improvements. This video will cover both the F1 and F2, and follows on from my previous vid on the E3. If you have annotations on, you'll see a link to that video now, and I suggest watching it first if you haven't already done so. For one thing, I'm going to skip showing a flight test of these planes. Suffice to say that they share extremely similar flight characteristics to the E3. The same roll, the same turning rate, the same powerful rudder, just with marginally improved speed and acceleration. I also won't be going into depth on the various tactics and manoeuvres you can perform with these planes, which will again be the same as those already demonstrated in the E3 video. Instead, I'll focus on what makes these planes unique and how that affects the way you'll use them in an arcade battle. So what we're looking at here is the F1. Like the E3, this has a pair of light machine guns on the nose, but the 20mm FF cannon on the wings are gone, replaced with a single 20mm FFM cannon firing through the propeller spinner. On the surface that may seem like a retrograde step, with the F1 only one 20mm cannon instead of two, but the FFM is far superior to the MGFFs, and it's used to great effect on the Bf110 and the early Focke-Wulf 190s. Let's see what ammunition belts are available. Firstly, with the machine guns, it's probably best to set them to stealth, as it's just as effective as the other belts with no distracting tracer. Now let's look at the cannon. I've chosen air targets which are packed full of fragmentation incendiaries and high explosive, and unlike the FFs, with this cannon, high explosive rounds actually work. Some other belts also have good amounts of HE and will also be quite effective. The plane also has bombs, but I'm using it purely in a fighter role. And with that, I'll take you straight to a series of attacking runs I recorded while flying this plane. And if you watched my E3 video, this will not be a surprise. I am starting immediately with diving attacks, also known these days as boom and zoom. Even with default belts, the cannons are quite effective, and once you have air targets unlocked, they make short work of most planes that cross your gun sights. The plane accelerates very quickly in a dive, and while there's a degree of control stiffening as there was with the E3, it's still quite easy to make fine aim adjustments and land shots precisely on target. Unlike the E3, you don't have to worry about convergence, and as the cannon is so much better, you can start firing from a little further away. In this case, the plane I'm targeting has gone into a steep dive and become a bit harder to hit, so I've switched to an easier target. And one drawback with this plane is a small amount of cannon ammunition available. Between attacking runs, make a habit of checking it and reloading. Even if there's still half of a belt left to use, it's better to have the maximum shells available in case you end up firing at multiple targets during an attack. On this particular occasion, I'm making a very steep attack on that P-40 who's right down at ground level. And this attack has a high degree of danger for any boom and zoomer. Basically, the chance of colliding with terrain is extremely high, and if I'd done that a year ago I would have died because the 109's elevators were sluggish, but now they're pretty good. Anyway, the vast majority of attacks I perform against fighters while flying this plane will be high-speed diving attacks, but that doesn't mean that they're all the same. This is early in a domination game, and with my squad I've climbed and gained control of the altitude around 3,000 meters. A BB-1 is trying to clamber up and take me on. I committed him to the attack with a full set on, then I leveled out and flew across the top of him, and then I could dive again and hit the full profile of his plane from above, which is a clean kill with no risk. A little later I spot an SPD flying higher than most of his team and apparently ignoring me. I approach quickly with a shallow dive with WEP to help me accelerate. Then I can line up an attack from the side and aim carefully with zoom to get another very simple kill. Now that the upper altitude is clear and the enemy are entirely down at ground level, it's time for some extreme high-speed boom and zoom passes right along the runway. I'm positioned above the incoming stream of enemies, drop into a vertical dive and then level out behind them, and follow them in. picking off whatever targets I can, while keeping my speed high and flying towards my own fighter spawn. As long as I don't turn hard, it's going to keep that speed all the way down the runway. I'm still doing well over 600 k's. So even though there's a lot of enemies around, it's very difficult for anyone to get a shot at me. And such is the climbing and acceleration speed of this plane that I'm quickly back in position for another run. I see a bunch of reds attacking a friendly. Now I'm not going to be in time to save that friendly, but the reds don't know that I'm coming, and they fly nice and straight, making the easiest possible targets. It's just a matter of looking for targets of opportunity and trying to avoid any potential collisions on the way. I think it goes without saying that this plane's a very capable bomber hunter. In this case I'm attacking from beneath, which is a great way to quickly rip wings off pretty much any bomber that you'll meet around this fighter's battle rating. And one last kill in this battle before I move on. An intercept dive on a P-40 that was flying across my line of flight, followed by an unsuccessful attempt to steal a kill from a squad mate before the battle ended. Anyway, you can see the basic tactic that I'm using here. Keep the speed high, use altitude to set up diving attacks, and not stopping to turn fight under any circumstances. When you have the altitude advantage in a ground strike game, this plane can be very effective at closing in and destroying any enemies who try to climb up. It's like an executioner swinging the axe. It's clean, precise and efficient. Here's another example of bomber hunting. I've actually been asked to cover this more often, as I tend to find it boring and I skip it to focus on the more interesting fighter kills instead. Now I approached him a little from the side and underneath and only settled on his 6 once his tail cannon was knocked out. Then I aimed directly at his wing roots and the fuselage, trying either for a fire, a wing rip or a tail rip. Even a pilot kill is possible. Now I have sent him a light, which quickly goes out, but I have to reload, during which I've lifted into a high yo-yo so that I can then dive to attack again. Now a nice deflection shot's presenting itself as the bomber pilot tried to dodge, and he straightens out, allowing me for another shot at his fuselage and wings from behind. I'm using zoom, aiming nice and carefully, and the tail parts company with the plane. As I said, hunting bombers is boring, but this plane is nevertheless up to the task. The last example shows the use of the plane's strength in winning altitude supremacy, and this case from a Lag 366 who also climbed and then came looking for me. Now I flew away from him, while continuing to gain altitude, knowing that I could outclimb him. And by the way, my plane did not even have engine injection unlocked at this time. Then I started what I've previously described in other videos as a climbing turn, allowing him to close the distance by turning sideways to him, and then as he gets closer, tightening the angle he'll need to both climb and turn in order to shoot at me when he gets within guns range. And even though I'm using a tactic that I've often performed before, this always gets a bit tense while the target approaches. I'm now travelling at a perpendicular angle while he flies straight at me, doubtless thinking he has me on the run and he has the advantage. Now I really tighten the noose, I climb harder, turn a bit sharper, and he will not have the energy to get guns on me. You can see he cannot keep that nose up. Then my rudder lets me bring the nose onto target, and he will suddenly realise the danger he is in. Just as I start firing, he goes into a split S, but I can continue the rudder turn, and just like that, it's all over. That's a nice clean kill again. So that's the F-1 for you, a brutal and efficient destroyer of planes. Now for the second part of the video, where I look at the F-2. The only real difference from the F-1 is the 151-15 cannon in its nose, and this comes with more ammunition than the FFM, which is great. But in War Thunder it doesn't have any belts with high explosive shells, which it did have historically. Instead, the best belt is the Armoured Targets belt, with its high proportion of API bullets. Don't think of this as a cannon, but as a large caliber machine gun, because that's what it is in this game. And if you're thinking that 1 heavy and 2 light machine guns isn't much for a plane with a 3.3 battle rating, you'd be right. What it does have, however, are rockets, which are mounted in very neat looking pods on the wings. I'll look at those a bit later, but first I'll talk about the effectiveness of its primary weapons. Now I could easily show you example after example of emptying long accurate bursts into targets and only registering occasional hits with no fires and very little structural damage. Indeed, this kind of result was common for me, 27 hits, 1 kill and 2 assists. Its guns are simply not very good when it comes to shooting down planes. And when you do shoot down an enemy, as I eventually do with this P-38, most of the time you'll be getting pilot kills. It's only very rarely that you'll actually damage tail controls or rip off a wing. It doesn't seem to matter about the attack angle. Your bullets punch right through enemy planes and do no damage unless they take out the pilot. Which begs the question of why they don't kill engines or set them on fire, which they rarely do, but in theory should be extremely good at. Just climbing and letting the P-38 expend what energy he has left as he tries to helicopter after me, and then I'll hammerhead over once he's stalled and get the pilot kill. And there it is. And lest you think I'm exaggerating, here's a series of them. It's quite ironic, getting a pilot kill on someone called Lobotomizer. The lack of hitting power will often make you very practiced at energy maneuvers, as you'll need multiple passes in order to finish off a target. In this case I go into a climbing spiral to keep this Heinkel interested and chasing after me before finally getting him to stall, and then I can hammerhead over for, you guessed it, another pilot kill. Now the reason I'm spiraling instead of going straight into a rope-a-dope, apart from wanting to keep him relatively close, he has powerful cannon on that particular A0, and I don't want to make myself an easy target by flying straight.
Nice.
Sometimes it'll decide to gift you with a few quick kills in a row, but it's very rare. Here's another pilot knockout, before actually ripping off a wing, which was quite a surprise. So this plane flies really well, it's just the guns that are a problem. Unless you use them to attack ground targets. Watch in this next sequence how easily it destroys a light pillbox, which are known to stubbornly resist direct hits from large-sized bombs. You need to be accurate, which means zooming in to aim and approaching on a shallow enough angle that you can climb away and not smash into the ground. Usually the bullets do the most damage at about 500 meters range or closer. Medium tanks pop just as easily, provided you attack them from above, the side or from behind. Now obviously you're not like a bomber, equipped with the ability to take out whole columns of targets in a single pass. You can however snipe them one at a time, while looping around and keeping your speed fairly high. Domination games where tanks capture runways are a good place to practice this. This is my first pass and I'm approaching too quickly to get a decent burst in, so I extend away, as if I was on a boom and zoom run, and I look for planes to shoot as I do so. Now once it's safe to do so, I'll gain a little height and then turn for another pass. Now it goes without saying that strafing ground targets puts you at considerable risk from enemy fighters, against which your only defense is your speed and your situational awareness. I'm unlikely to kill any attacks on this, kill any tanks on this next attack run, as they'll be facing me and I'll be hitting their frontal armour. So I'm going to look to target planes instead. There's a motionless plane down there on the roadway, and we'll see if the guns are capable of taking him out. And it's a fragile plane too, the Ki-61. And no, guns are not up to the task. But at least they can take out a burning biplane. And once again I'm climbing when it's safe to do so, and now I'll have a better angle to attack the tanks. And it's about time I killed some, as no one else is, and we look like losing this battle as a result. Before I begin the dive, I'm looking around to make sure that I'm not going to be easily blindsided by an enemy fighter on the way. Well, that was better, but it's not enough, and as is typical with these single airfield maps, the tickets are running down very quickly, and I need to kill more tanks without delay. You can see my approach is front on, and I simply cannot penetrate the frontal armour. So there goes my chance of helping my team save this battle. It's just about over, so I'm going to risk looping over quickly. And from this angle, the bullets work. Another very quick loop to try and get another shot in. Taking my time to gain a bit of altitude while spiral climbing to a degree, just in case someone wants to target me. And this time an attack from directly above, which is also quite effective. But that was too little and too late. The battle is just about over. This ground strike battle, however, had run for about 10 minutes already, and I was out of targets at high altitude where I'd been patrolling. Now there are a line of pillboxes on the coast, but they were protected by a swarm of enemy fighters. But this column of tanks out in the desert had no one around them, and it seemed safe to drop in and clean them up. And this kind of situation is ideal for the F-2, as it has the agility to accurately pick out moving targets that are dodging around in difficult terrain. I'm still travelling a little too fast for my first diving attack and also for this one, so I've now deployed flaps in a bid to slow down. I'm climbing between each attack as that keeps me clear of the terrain and also lets me see if there's any incoming enemy planes, and it gives me the best firing angle when I make my attacking passes. You can see how difficult these tanks would be for bombers to hit. And even though it is only going up against AI, it's actually quite enjoyable flying this way. And it's certainly not without risk. Pulling up nice and high before starting the run from behind the tank, which is dodging around quite a bit, and I'm out of ammo. And while I reloaded, a bomber tried to take out that last tank, and simply found it too difficult to do so. And remember though, he needs to land a direct hit to have any hope of killing it. The 150-115s do seem to be unrealistically good at taking out these ground targets. But given the struggles this plane has against aircraft, I'm not going to complain. Remember the rockets this plane can carry. My main objection to rockets is usually when they degrade the performance of the plane, and when the main armament is good enough that they're just not necessary, and neither is true in the case of the F-2. In my testing there's a very slight performance drop-off, but it's negligible, and its weapons could certainly use all the help that they can get. The F-2's rockets seem to fly at a higher velocity than most, which makes them pretty easy to aim. and in fact I often use them in preference to firing the machine guns. So there you have the two Fredericks. One, thanks to its brilliant 20mm cannon, is a great interceptor and energy fighter. The other has all the same flight characteristics, but lacks the ability to kill planes as easily. I do recommend the use of rockets when you've unlocked them, as well as attacking tanks and pillboxes with the armoured targets belt, when it's safe to do so. And just to show my experience flying these planes, when I started recording I hadn't flown either very much, and certainly not with any great success. Since then I've scored 32 kills in the F-1 over 9 missions, with 2 more deaths, both crashes, and in the F-2 I've flown 10 missions for 8 aircraft kills and 9 ground target kills, without loss. Now if you like a versatile and unusual plane, the F-2 might be what you're after. But if you want an effective fighter that gets aircraft kills quickly and cleanly, the F-1 is your plane of choice. Well, that's all I have for you in this video. I do hope you found it helpful. The next one will be a bit of a change of pace for me as I move away from pure energy fighters for a while and tackle the A6M2 Mod 11. Until then I wish you luck, and I'll see you in the skies.